All right, I'd like to welcome everybody to today's event. My name is Russ Danner. I'm VP of Products here at Crafter CMS, and I will be your host and presenter for today. Today we're going to be talking about building composable digital experiences. So we'll start with an overview of composable enterprise architecture, and then we'll look at the pros and cons of composable digital experiences. After that, we'll talk about some best practices for building composable digital experience platforms with best of stack components. And then we'll look at a demo of Crafter CMS in this context. At the end, I'll try to take some questions. So please feel free to put any questions that you have in the Q&A area, and I'll take as many of those as I can at the end of today's event. And with that, let's jump into today's topic. Now, Gartner says that 70% of all large and medium-sized organizations will include composability in their approval criteria for new applications by 2024. So what is composability for the enterprise, and why is it so important? Gartner defines a composable enterprise as an organization that delivers business outcomes and adapts to the pace of business change. And it does this through the assembly and combination of packaged business capabilities, or PBCs, which are application building blocks that have been purchased or developed and that can be combined and recombined. Now, for the remainder of today, we're going to really focus on the technical implementation of this, but it's important to understand that when it comes to enterprise architecture, we're talking about more than just technical capabilities. Enterprise architecture is typically a mindset and a way of approaching and solving problems for the business, and technical architecture is always aligned with that, and that is absolutely the case here with composable enterprises. So based on Gartner's definition of a composable enterprise and composability in general, we can see that the whole concept is there to really deal with a high rate of change. And this high rate of change is absolutely something that we see in the digital experience space. Regardless of whether we're talking about employee experiences, customer experiences, partner experiences, change is a constant in these kinds of environments. And the source of change comes from all over the place. It could be that we just need to deal with technical debt. It could be that economic conditions are changing. Of course, we see new channels emerge every day, from digital assistants to smart devices to IoT to AI. There's always new kind of technical revolutions that we're trying to take advantage of to create efficiencies. And of course, we always want to interconnect these experiences. So we're always dealing with change. And composability gives us the tools that we need to take advantage of that change and make it work for us rather than work against us. Now, taking this to the technical side of things, this approach relies on something called a packaged business capability, or PBC. So let's take a closer look at a PBC and try to distill how they can help our enterprises innovate at a much higher rate and volume and adapt to and take advantage of change for competitive advantage. So here's an illustration of a PBC. And Gartner defines this PBC as a well-defined business capability recognized by business users. And there's something very important about that definition, and it's that it's recognized by business users. So in other words, what we're looking at is a technical unit of work or an encapsulation of technical capabilities, but it's going to be used by business users. In order to facilitate this, PBCs must be modular, discoverable, autonomous, and orchestration ready. Each PBC contains a data schema, a set of services or APIs, event channels, and user experiences for its specific set of business capabilities. All of which, of course, are technical capabilities that we're all familiar with, but what's new here is that these are factored and grouped and also tooled in a way that allows the business to combine and recombine these capabilities to solve business problems and deal with change and innovate at a much higher rate and greater volume, as we've been discussing. So to make this concrete, let's look at an example. So what we want to do is think about something like accounts, assets, products, orders, inventory, the kinds of capabilities that would have been traditionally managed together in a monolithic architecture, but in this composable architecture that are all packaged in a very modular and autonomous fashion that makes them very easily identifiable, or what we would call discoverable, by business users who then combine or recombine, or what we would call compose, a solution to a specific business problem. Leveraging this architecture and this approach, the business solution is composed by business users. So we're moving at a much faster rate. We're moving at the rate of business rather than the rate of, say, traditional software development, because the business is able to quickly assemble using low-code and no-code type assembly to combine and recombine these PBCs for specific business challenges. I think it starts to become obvious on its face how composability can really help us adapt to change. Now let's take this architecture and move it into the realm of digital experience platforms. So first, let's look at a traditional digital experience platform, and then we're going to look at a composable digital experience platform. So here we have a traditional digital experience platform, or what we would traditionally call a suite. We can see it's a complete monolith, and a single vendor supplies all of the capabilities. We see content management, we see search engine optimization, we see marketing automation, email automation, and so on and so on. All of these are supposedly tightly integrated and function well together. Now, in reality, the truth of that may vary from vendor to vendor. Many of these platforms are put together through acquisitions, and some of the integrations are not what they're cracked up to be. But this is the idea. This is the promise of this architecture. Regardless, we can see that the hope here is that this single integrated platform meets all of our needs. And if it worked perfectly, in a way, it would be awesome. The problem is change. Because it's a monolithic platform, we have to wait for a single vendor. So if a new channel comes out, or we want to create a new experience, or we want to leverage a new front-end technology, we just have to wait for that single platform to adapt and handle it. So without belaboring the point too much, we can easily see how this kind of architecture really doesn't work in an environment where we need to have a lot of innovation or there's a lot of change. And of course, in digital experience, this is why we see a move away from the suite-based DXP platforms for many types of users and use cases towards headless API-first style architectures. And there are various kinds of these, but the main idea here is that these services can easily be, again, combined and recombined. Here's the thing. Composability is an evolution of this style of thought, and what it's trying to do is put these ideas of modularity and autonomy and discoverability and orchestration friendliness around them so that these services are more accessible to the business, so that the business users can compose the solutions rather than waiting for developers to compose the solutions. We want the developers to build the PBCs, and then we want the business to build the solutions based on those PBCs. So by contrast, this is what a PBC-based or composable DXP would look like. In this model, content management, digital asset management, marketing automation, personalization, SEO, and so on are packaged as individual components that are potentially supplied by different vendors or other kinds of sources. What we can see here is an integration-centric approach that gives us a best-of-breed style benefit. And the difference between this best-of-breed and what people traditionally think of as best-of-breed is that the integration is not necessarily done in-house. Packaged business capability-based components are ready to integrate right out of the box and do so by plugging into a composable platform. You might say that Composable DXP tries to give you the best of both worlds. In other words, you get all of the tooling and the out-of-the-box sort of nature that you would normally get with a suite-based approach, but you get to choose the best component for a specific job, whether it's SEO or content or what have you. But I actually think that Composable offers an even better story, because this isn't just about thesis, antithesis, and a synthesis. What you see here is a little bit more like a 1 + 1 = 5. With composability, we're so much more adaptive to change. And also, we can pick just the components that we want. So we're not overpaying for solutions that we don't need like we would in a suite-based solution. And we're not paying for a lot of development or waiting for a lot of development like we would in a traditional best-of-breed solution. Composable DXP really is the superior solution and offers the best chance of being highly competitive in an environment where we have a lot of innovation and we have a lot of change. Now let's go over some best practices. The first best practice I want to share is to just not bite off more than you can chew. There are very few of us that are starting fresh. Most of us have existing architectures, existing solutions, and existing systems that we need to work with. For most of us, getting to a composable architecture and a composable enterprise is a matter of evolution. The best way to tackle this is through an agile or iterative approach where any new components are brought in as PBCs. So you want to be part of that 70% of companies that Gartner is talking about by 2024 who include composability as part of their solution selection process. Another thing you want to do is think about granularity. So composability introduces a concept of granularity. How small should a PBC be? Well, I would suggest that like service orientation, we don't want to go too small because that gives us too much of a management headache, and we don't want to go too large because then it starts to feel like we're managing monoliths. So just think about the granularity of your PBCs and make sure that it makes sense. You're not building monoliths and you're not building something that's so small and granular that you create kind of a management problem for yourself. Another thing I think is important to keep in mind is the technology mix. So PBCs are going to allow us to easily bring in all kinds of different technologies. And of course, by design, they're going to be very packaged up, self-contained, and they're going to integrate well. But I do want to make sure that at the end, I'm going to have a very consistent user experience and that the technology is not going to give me a bunch of management or hiring headaches. So there's something to think about there. It's not a major concern. The architecture tries to deal with it, but something to keep in mind. Now, those are some best practices that are applicable to any composable enterprise architecture. Specifically with digital experience platforms and Composable DXP, you're going to want to think really hard about the content management component that you bring into the system. And the reason for this is that content is a cross-cutting concern. And what I mean by cross-cutting concern is twofold. First, it is going to be leveraged across every channel in our customer journey. Content is just a critical piece of a digital experience. And the other part of that is that many of the other packaged business capabilities are going to need content. The second piece of this puzzle here is that we just talked about the technology mix. So we could have a wide range of front-end technologies that we need to be able to author content for. Things like React, Vue, Angular, Bootstrap. It could be a native mobile application. It could be a digital assistant that doesn't have a traditional UI but is voice activated. The key here is that the authoring capabilities as part of the content management system need to be very friendly and work across PBCs and allow you to work with a wide range of technologies. Another reason the content management capabilities are so important in this context is that your content authors often need to access a lot of the capabilities offered by PBCs, whether it's content authoring, workflow, deployment, marketing automation, search engine optimization, personalization, and so on and so on. And these can be provided by different vendors as PBCs, but they need to be integrated into the authoring experience in a very consistent and easy to use fashion. At the end of the day, content authors still want to be able to work in sort of a cockpit that is specialized for their specific set of tasks that they do. So we want to get the benefits of composability without introducing a lot of inefficiencies for our content authors or marketers and what have you. So look for content management capabilities that can pull in other PBCs and present them as part of that cockpit. You need something very pluggable in that fashion. Another thing to remember is that just because the business is composing the final solution, for most organizations, there's still going to be a process that's similar to a software development lifecycle or an SDLC. So you're still going to have a development phase of sorts, which is more of a low-code, no-code style experience. And then you will have some sort of quality assurance type process, and then ultimately move to production. And you want tools that fit into that kind of environment. In other words, many of the concerns of DevOps, like lower environments and automation and monitoring, are still critical components in a composable landscape. So from a content management perspective, that PBC needs to support the ability to move content from production down to a lower environment where the composability is going to take place. As the solution moves forward in the quality process, we want to easily be able to take that composed solution and easily move it forward into the quality assurance environment and ultimately out to production. And your packaged business component that supports content management needs to facilitate this or integrate into that process in a very simple way. Another best practice, I think, is to favor PBCs that are based on open source. There's more than 30 years of hard data to suggest that open source software is much more secure and helps prevent vendor lock-in more than proprietary software. So if you are looking to avoid vendor lock-in, you like security, and you like innovation, then open source PBCs is a great way to go. All right, now we're going to jump to the topic of Crafter CMS in the context of a composable DXP. So let's look at that. And for those of you who are new to Crafter CMS, we are an open source headless plus CMS with features and functionality targeted at large size organizations and fast growing medium sized organizations that see innovation as a key to competitiveness. Our authoring capabilities work across any channel and across any front-end technology. And our content repository is Git-based, which provides a lot of benefits that traditional database-centric CMSs and repositories can't offer, like including a time travel style versioning system that lets you support point-in-time rollbacks and discoveries, such as a legal discovery. It also enables branching, which allows you to support redesigns without double publishing and really advanced secure use cases like compartmentalizing teams and content. So if you have very secure HR content or a product that's in a secret sort of state and you don't want anybody else to see it within your authoring team, you can create these small teams on branches where that content is secure and visible only to that team. Additionally, Crafter supports what we call DevContentOps, which is the bringing together of content operations and DevOps operations. We make it really easy for you to move content from a production environment down to a lower environment to support the composable process and the quality assurance process before going to production. Now, in the context of a composable DXP, Crafter is going to play a couple roles. The primary role is as the content management PBC. So content repository, authoring capabilities, as well as publishing and deployment capabilities are all part of that core content management capability. We also have out-of-the-box support for workflow and approval, user management, personalization, search, and many other capabilities that are typical of CMSs. But in the context of a composable DXP, it's very possible that these are going to be provided as other packaged business components. Now, our authoring tool, Crafter Studio, is that cockpit that we talked about, and it does allow us to plug in other PBCs and surface them inside of that authoring tool so that while authors are getting the best of breed benefits of PBCs that supply something like, say, workflow, from outside of Crafter, they get to use it within Crafter and it feels natural. And that's a big deal in terms of their efficiency. Now, with that in mind, I think showing is a little bit better than telling, and so I want to jump into our demo. And here's what we're going to look at. First, we're going to look at the authoring capabilities. I want you to see just how easy it is to edit content within Crafter Studio, and again, do that across any kind of channel or any kind of front-end framework and across PBCs. The next thing we're going to look at is how we can look up and identify and install and then leverage PBCs to create experiences within our environment. In some cases, we'll be installing tooling to help our content authors and marketers, and in other cases, we'll be picking up PBCs that we can leverage to create end user experiences. So we're going to see a little bit of both. Then we'll take a look at the headless nature of the content that we capture. So I want you to see that this is all headless content. And finally, I'll show you a quick demonstration of how we can facilitate that DevContentOps process. So you can see how easy it is to move content from a production environment up to a distributed repository and then down to a lower environment to facilitate the composable development process, the quality process, and so on. So with that, let's jump into the demo. All right, what we're looking at here is Crafter Studio. This is our authoring application. It's going to serve as either your headless CMS and be part of a bigger DXP, or it's going to serve as your DCX and be your composition platform and help you coordinate. So we're going to show both use cases. With that, let's go ahead and log in. When we first log in, we're taken to the project screen, and here we can see that the application is able to manage many projects. Each of those projects can represent a different digital experience built with different technologies and also different kinds of experiences. So we've got an Alexa experience, a pure headless experience. We've got websites, we've got AR, VR, video, e-commerce, and so on. So we're going to focus on this pure headless Alexa experience first and just look at Crafter CMS as a headless CMS. So let's go ahead and open this project, and when we do, we can see that this is a authoring experience for a specific type of content. In this case, pure headless content targeted at this digital assistant, Alexa. We've got a quick create menu up here at the top where we can easily create different content types. In this case, we're managing facts. If we look at the model here, we can see we've got different attributes. As we use a simple content modeler to create the content type, and you can put any field that you want here, and we've modeled this as having titles and dates and so on, and then you have a rich text area where you can specify the title and the information about the fact. Let's close this new one here, and let's open an existing fact, and you can see these are organized by date, and I'm going to go ahead and open up this fact for the 4th of July, and here you can see the date information, and then here's our fact. Here it says Independence Day, USA. Now let's go ahead and close this content out for the moment. We'll put it down here as a little window, and we'll look at the rest of this app. So we have a testing console. We also have a fact browser that makes it easy to walk the tree of dates and facts and the content that's going to drive our Alexa skills, so we can see that here. And now let's jump over to the emulator and submit a request to the headless CMS for content executing the skill that's running on Crafter. So there's our response, and let's go ahead and play the voice.
Independence Day, USA. Would you like to hear more about this fact?
Now the headless content and the skill execution is coming from Crafter. I'll explain that in a bit. Let's go in and modify the content. So let's change this from Independence Day to the United States of America was born. Now we could put inflection here with some markup, but we're going to keep it pretty simple. I'm just going to use this string here. Let's get that right and save it. And then we can jump back into the emulator and let's execute the request again. And now let's play the audio.
The United States of America was born. Would you like to hear more about this fact?
Pretty awesome, right? And these are the kinds of tools you need if you're going to create these kinds of experiences. So it's not just about web pages, it's about any kind of experience. Now here we can see both the request going to Crafter and the response that we got back. And it's important to understand that Crafter's producing that response on the right-hand side. Let me show you how that's done. So we'll close the emulator, and now we're going to open up this scripts panel here in Crafter Studio, and you see this fact post Groovy. This is a bit of logic that is able to interpret the request coming from Alexa and then pull that headless content, compose the response in the right format for Alexa, and return it to that agent in the format that it expects. So unlike a lot of other headless CMSs, Crafter gives you complete control over the shape of the response for your headless content. So your APIs are very efficient. They can be purpose-built for a specific agent, and it allows us to port these kinds of channels without any intermediaries. It also enables Crafter to plug in where another headless CMS was previously. We can basically emulate the format of another headless CMS. So if a customer's having trouble with that particular CMS vendor, we can almost pretend to be that CMS and plug right in without any changes to your end application. So there's a lot of benefits to having that kind of control over what we call the shape or the format and structure and contents of the API response. Now there's a ton to show, so I want to close out this application here, and we're going to go to another experience, and we're going to look at Crafter Studio playing that role as a digital composition platform, or DCX. So to do this, we're going to use another project over here called the Webinar Experience. I'll just go ahead and click on that, and you can see this opens up an in-context preview for a really attractive Parallax website. And the nice thing about this experience builder that you're going to see here is that it works for any technology. It could be Angular, it could be Vue, it could be React, it could be Bootstrap, it could be server-side rendered, client-side rendered. It really doesn't matter. And this preview environment gives you a safe authoring sandbox with really robust editing features, and that's what I want to start showing here. Now you can see on the sidebar there's a couple of different things here. You have pages and taxonomy, which you don't have in Alexa. You still have a quick create menu, but this is focused on this kind of site's content, for example, blog posts. So that's how you could create a new blog post very quickly. And if you want to edit a page here, you're going to go over to the right-hand side here, and you see this pencil. We're going to turn that on, and this panel jumps out on the right-hand side. That's some tools for editing. And now, as we hover over different elements on the page, we can see this green highlight, and if we click on it, we can make an edit. So I'm going to put my company name here, Evolve GT, and what I'm going to do is start transforming this site into a motorcycle track day business website. Motorcycles are something that I'm into and I think are neat, so we'll use that as some demo content. Now, I want to put a video here that's a motorcycle related video. I'm going to pull that off of my desktop, and you can see that the system will accept that. You see that video region highlight, and I just drop the video here, and it's going to upload that video into the system for me. It's that easy to add a video to the platform, and it immediately starts playing, and I can see what that looks like. Okay, now I want to change the headline here, so let's go and change it. So I'm going to just click on it, and we'll change this to Motorcycle Track Days. Okay, let's do a change to the call to action. Again, even a button label, we just click on it and edit it. So everything is sort of point and click edit, just like you would expect. Now behind the scenes, as we'll see later, this is all headless content, so it's so neat, it's so easy to make these kinds of changes. All right, now I want to change this image here on the left, and this time instead of pulling from my desktop, I'm going to pull from the asset manager here. So we're going to look for some images. I think what I'm looking for is on the next page, so let's go to the next page here, and yeah, now we see some motorcycle content that I preloaded here. Let's grab this picture here, and I can drag it out, and the image areas are highlighted. You can see I can't drop it on the video area, but any other image area that accepts this kind of asset will let me drop it. So let's go ahead and drop it on this particular image, and that's that simple as well. Now we'll change our headline here in this overview, and you can see this is just another type of region. I don't need to belabor the point, but we do have rich text editors and all kinds of different types of editors that work for different types of content, and again, it's just point and click, so you get a sense of that. This is just showing you can edit different types of elements, and that they're, again, we're going to trigger the parallax and see that. Now let me show you another cool feature in Crafter, and to do that I'm going to turn off editing mode and watch what happens. Now if you pay attention, you'll notice that these cards that hover over the images moved up on top of the images like they would for the user. And you can see that when you go into edit mode and out of edit mode, you can give the experience builder hints that make it easy to make editing easier for the authors. I mean, it would be hard to drop an image on top of a card and so on. So you also have shortcut keys, so you can turn on and off editing just with a shortcut key, and that's worth seeing as well. So there's a lot of conveniences built in here. The studio is really rich and it makes it really easy. Okay, now we've done a couple of content edits and I think you get the idea there. So now let's talk a little bit about the construction of these pages and how you can influence that. So first, let's look at this workouts area. Let's say that I don't like this. Well, if I want to get rid of it, I just pick it up, drag it to the trash can, and it's gone. Let's say I want to move this sign up area up here between these two regions. I just pick it up, move it to where I want it, and drop it. So everything in terms of creating layouts and reorganizing pages is just drag and drop. So you point and click to edit and then drag and drop. You can also add new components through this menu here. And I'll show you more of that, but let's just build a new page to do that. For that, we're going to go over here to the sidebar. So I'm going to click on the Crafter logo. That'll open up pages, and I'm going to pick where I want the new page in the information architecture. So I'm going to click on the options here on the home page, and I'm going to put a new page right underneath it, and I'll click new content. So here we can see I need to select a content type, and generic page is the only option at the moment. And when I do, I initially get a form, and you can see all of the fields for a generic page. I'm just going to go ahead and fill out the required fields with some dummy content. And the fields that you see here are definable by you. This is a content model that you create, and you decide what the content is and what the structure is, and you do that through our content modeling tool. So let's go ahead and continue to fill these out. We're going to do a couple of these headlines, which you'll see later where they're used. All right, we'll go down to the button text here. Okay, and just choose a target for that link. We'll go ahead and fill out the page title. Now we're going to add a media banner. So I'm going to click add, and I'm going to create a new media banner. And this is going to go at the top of our page, as we'll see in a second here. And a media banner is modeled as something that's pretty rich. It lets me choose a title. I can choose a type of media, video or image, and I can also choose an array of images. We're just going to use one image, so I'm going to go ahead and pick that image here. Let's use an existing image. This opens up a search interface here, and I'm going to browse for image in the repository. And let's see here. Let's look at the blogs. I think I've got an image there that I like. And you can see, okay, over here, there's a picture of my buddy Josh on his bike. He looks great. Let's go ahead and save that. And once we do, Crafter will take us to the page. So we're done with the sidebar here. Let's close that up and give ourselves a little bit more real estate. And now let's turn on editing mode. And I want to start with components that are going to give this page some structure. And initially, I think with all this white space here, let's constrain it a little bit. And so we have a component called a paper, which is just sort of a visual element. You'll see here in a second what it does. Let's drop it in the drop zone here. And now we can see that visual element. We can see how it hovers over the image, which is nice. And we have a drop zone in that component as well. So let's put a bit of content in that area. And for that, I think we're going to start with a 2-column with a heading. So let's find that on our component panel and drop it. This really shows how you can create layouts in Crafter, and that layouts are compositional. Now, let's change this title. And I'm kind of building a landing page here, so let's come up with something that we think a user might be interested in. So we'll say something about learn how to be a better, safer rider, for example. All right, that looks good. Now we want to start adding content to this area. And the content that I want is a lead form that comes from HubSpot. It's not here, so I have to add it. And this is going to be our first package business capability. So I'm going to go to our project tools and then go to our plugins and PBC management and click search for and install. And you can see that we have a library of these, and they're from all different vendors. And we're going to look at one or two of them. So I'm going to go ahead and pick HubSpot because we've got a short amount of time here. The PBC will prompt me for any things that it needs, like a token for HubSpot. So let's go ahead and give it that. And then click install. Once we're done with that, we can see that the PBC is installed and we should be able to use it. So let's close the dialog, then find our component. Here you can see HubSpot form. We're going to pick it up and drag it onto the form. Let's put it in the left-hand column and drop it. And it immediately says, please choose the form. So I'm going to click on the component. This will give me a pencil. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to open the form. And here we can see it's prompting us to pick a form. And I don't see the one that I want to use, so I'm going to create it. So we close the form, jump to HubSpot here, and I'm going to choose it that I want to create an embedded form. Click Next. We're going to choose our form type. I like this event registration here. This preview looks good, so we'll click Next. And kind of get this stuff out of the way here, and maybe delete this job title just to show an edit. So let's delete that. And now let's try and go ahead and save this form. And before we do that, let's change the name to something we can recognize in Crafter. How about DXP webinar? And let's go ahead and save the form now, and we'll publish it. And it'll show us some embed code, but we don't care about that because we have a PBC package in Crafter. So now we're going to jump back to Studio. We're going to reopen the form. And now we're going to check and see, and there it is, DXCP webinar. So we'll choose that, click Save, and we see our HubSpot form. So that's awesome. Now I want to add a little bit extra content here, and I'm just going to show you a little bit of personalization. And for this, I'm going to basically place a featured blog in the other column, and it will automatically render some content for us. And that content is targeted, and it's coming from the blog. So let's jump over there real quick. Here you can see some blog articles, and let's click on one of the blog articles and then click Edit. And here you can see the structure of a blog article. This is totally headless content being presented through our application, and you can see it has some metadata. So it's featured, it's going to be part of tips, and it's going to be about racing. Okay, let's close this one, and let's open up another one. Click Edit on this one, and if we scroll down, we can see the content, and then we see its metadata. It's also featured, it's part of tips, and it's for track. Okay, now let's go back to our landing page, and we'll look at this targeter here. Let's close the components menu here and go to audience targeting, and we're going to set the industry to track day. Now industry is just a parameter that we're using in this example. You can define any of these that you want, and you can see that the targeter picks content that was tagged for that industry. So that's completely definable by you. Now we're getting close on time, and I do want to cover a couple things like workflow. So just thinking about the publishing process here, let's look at the home page. And before we publish, we're going to want to check that the site looks good on different devices. So we'll go to the mobile previewer. We'll take a look at the preview here, and we'll see that it looks pretty good in parallax. You can see that parallax working as we scroll, and just get a sense of that. Let's turn the phone on its side. So we'll rotate it here. Now this looks good. So let's get ready to workflow and publish this item. So let's go ahead and look at the dashboard here. This is a workflow dashboard. We can see items that we've recently been working on. There's dashboards for items that are scheduled to go live, items that are waiting for approval, and you can see all the states that we support. So there's a built-in approval workflow. There's ability to see version history and submit content for publishing and so on. And it's all out of the box. So if your workflow is straightforward, you can use Crafter right out of the box for workflow and publishing, and you can see some of those features here. Now, what if I have an advanced workflow, or what if my users are outside of the workflow engine? Let's take a look at what we can do for that. And this takes us to PCBs, or packaged business components, for the authoring experience, not just the delivery experience, but the authoring experience. And in this case, we're going to plug in a different workflow, and I'm going to use Trello. So here's our Trello board, and it's a Kanban board, of course, and you can see some workflow states. And let's go ahead and make a change here. Let's just maybe move this test work card, and just so you can see it move here. And now I'm going to jump back to Studio and go to Project Tools, and I want to install Trello. So I'm going to go back to PCB Management. We'll find Trello and install it. So again, we'll have to provide some keys and then it will install. And now we can go ahead and close this dialog box and close the management console here. And if you look closely, the sidebar re-rendered and we now have a Trello board. Now I can configure this to be a certain location, have a certain icon and so on, but if I click on it, I can see exactly that Trello board that we were just looking at. And it's interactive and works in both directions. So let's move an item here in Crafter, say from ideas down to web team. And now let's jump over to Trello, and you can see this has moved here. And now what we'll do is we'll change the structure of the Kanban board. Let's add a new column. So let's call this one webinar demo and add that new list. And let's move the list right about here before web team doing. And now jump back to Crafter and we see those changes. So hopefully you get a sense of how powerful that is, but let's do a little bit more here. So we'll move some cards in here and we'll jump back to Trello. And we can see that card is moved. And now in Trello, let's create a new card. So we're a new unit of work. This could be somebody outside the CMS collaborating with content managers. And they're going to create a task for us to publish some webinar content. So let's go ahead and add that card. And let's change the color of the cover. And I'm going to choose blue. Okay, and let's put a description. Okay, this is the world's greatest marketing campaign here. Let's fix this grammatical error and click Save. And now our card's updated, and let's jump back to Crafter and see it. Okay, there it is. And now let's click on it. And you can see we actually have actions here on this card. And one of those is to attach existing content. So let's click on that. And we're going to choose our content that we've been creating. The easiest way to do that is to filter for content type and look for generic articles. So let's apply that filter. And here we can see the 3 generic articles. I'm going to choose the demo landing page that we've been working on and append that selection. And now we see that there's a little paperclip on the content. And if we go back to Trello, we see there's a paperclip here. And we can see a link in Trello to the content. So you start to see the power here, okay? Now let's attach an image from my desktop to the Trello card. All right, it's uploading. And here we can see the image. And let's also connect a Google document. So we're going to do an attachment and we're going to choose Google Docs. And now I'm going to pick my Google Doc. It's going to be this campaign design brief here. So we'll select that. And you can see Trello is attaching that. And this is all, Trello functionality. And now we're going to jump back into Crafter Studio. And we can see the 3 attachments. Let's go ahead and click on the card. This opens up the detail view. I can see the description and the documents. I can see my image here in Studio. And let's click on the design brief. This will open up the design brief. So now we're really collaborating with people outside of the CMS. This is a really rich experience, and I could potentially, for example, provide some feedback on the brief. Okay, jumping back to Studio. Let's go ahead and close this card here, and now it's time to publish it so we can move it to a workflow state, for example, web review. What I think I'm going to do is request a scheduled publish. So we'll assume the review is done and we want to schedule the publish. So we're just going to stay in the review column, click publish, and then we're going to choose to push this content, and we're going to push it at a later date. So we'll pick our day and time. And then we can add a submission comment and pick our publishing target. So let's just put a little comment here. And then we'll click schedule. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. And let's go ahead and close the Kanban board now because that's taken care of. And this will move from the review to schedule when it's time. But you can see that this item is now in workflow state. So it's scheduled to go live. So the status has changed. And if we open up the workflow dashboard here, we can see our content listed under scheduled and approved. So that workflow is complete. Now we've shown a bunch of authoring features, but remember this is all headless content. So to show that, I'm going to go to our GraphQL interface and I'm going to make a GraphQL API request for this content. So let's run that. And here we can see the content that we've edited throughout the demo. And I hope this drives home that Crafter is providing a DCX. We're providing a really rich and powerful headless CMS capability and a really rich content authoring tool that lets authors work in a way that's very efficient for them regardless of the technology or the technology experience. Now, the last thing I said I would talk about is what we call DevContentOps, and that's that ability to facilitate the QA process and the development process by moving content back to lower environments and code and configuration and compositions from lower environments up to production through the testing environments. And I'm going to show a very brief demonstration of this capability. In fact, what we're going to do is just take the work that we've done today and push it to a remote Git repository. And I'm going to show you that everything that we've done, from editing content to creating compositions, even installed PBCs and their configurations, can be pushed to a remote Git repository like GitHub and then shared with other parts of the innovation process, whether that's a lower environment, a composition environment, a QA environment, or a developer machine. So this is really powerful stuff, and it really accelerates innovation. So to get started, we'll click on Git, and this shows a remote repository. And in fact, we can connect our project to multiple remote repositories, and we're connected to this remote repository in GitHub. It could be anything. It could be GitLab, Bitbucket, any Git repository. And what I'm going to do is push from Studio up to that remote. So we'll choose the branch and we'll click push. And now work is going from my Studio environment up to GitHub. So now let's click to GitHub and click refresh, and we see all of those changes. And look at the comment here. You see that plugin? So even the plugin that we installed is here to be shared with other environments. Now imagine I'm a DevOps manager in a different environment and I want to get this work into that environment. I'm going to go log into Studio and I'll come to this screen here, and what I'm going to do is click Create Project. Here we see project templates, but we also see GitHub, and I click that, and now I'm going to put in the information or the coordinates to that GitHub repository, and that's usually a URL and some credentials. And then once I've done that, Crafter Studio will import that site from that remote repository into my environment. Okay, I know I flew through that section there and it's probably not adequate, but I do want to get to some Q&A, so let's jump to that now. We do have a few questions. The first one is there a standard for PBC packaging or the composite backplane that supports the discovery and automation of capabilities and so on? So the answer to that is no. Composability is an enterprise architecture and a design pattern, and its implementations rely on widely used technologies and approaches, including REST, Mock, Docker, and so on. That said, each composable vendor supplies a proprietary platform for discovery and orchestration that really defines the packaging mechanics required for these capabilities to participate. And package business capability vendors must wrap their capabilities for each variety of platform. So that's the reality today. Now, will there be standards in the future? There likely will be attempts to create them at a minimum. If we think about history, we've seen distributed objects and Corba, we've seen SOA and DSBs, we've seen portlets and the portlet spec for portals. So these are similar examples, and of course standards benefit vendors and consumers, and platform providers are really eager to have their approach become the reference implementation. So I think that's a normal part of the technology maturity life cycle, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if some kinds of standards develop in the future, or there's an attempt to develop standards in the future. Okay, another question that we have here is any CMS with a plugin framework composable? And that's a great question. I think the answer to this is no. Any composable DXP or headless CMS can be really considered pluggable, but not all platforms with a plugin system are composable. So the key differentiation is really in the details, and there's really kind of two things that say whether or not your plugin system is a composable system. The first is really the construction of that system. Are the platform and its plugins constructed in a composable way? Specifically, is the platform divisible and loosely coupled itself? And are the plugins discoverable, autonomous, and orchestration ready, and so on? Or are they simply extensions of like an otherwise monolithic stack? So that would be construction. Another key differentiation is ecosystem. Who provided the package capabilities? If the platform is not open for external vendors to provide their capabilities, then even if the system is constructed in a composable way, it's not likely to provide the promised benefits of a composable system where you could plug in and out different vendors or different suppliers of capabilities. All right, we've got another question here, and this might be our last one, depends on time, but this next question here is, are there any disadvantages to composable DXP solutions? Obviously, we've spent a lot of time talking about the benefits, but what are the disadvantages? Well, we've got a great blog on our website about this topic, so definitely check that out at CrafterCMS.com. I'll just try to hit some highlights here. So the main disadvantage is complexity. If every capability is supplied by a different vendor, then you have technical complexity in terms of technology and the technology mix and integrations, and you have vendor complexities in terms of support and contracts and subscriptions. So that's really the main disadvantage I see, and it's something that you're going to have to manage. Now, Crafter CMS tries to combat this by supplying many PBCs ourselves and a platform to compose the experiences with, as we just saw in the demo. So remember, you can use Crafter CMS simply as a headless CMS in another composable platform, like let's say Uniform or Builder.io. If you want to plug into another composable platform or DCX. You can also use Crafter CMS's other packaged business capabilities like search and profile and deployment in the same fashion. So in that sense, we are just particular packaged business components. You can also use our composition platform, Crafter Studio, with other vendors' packaged business capabilities. And you can use our platform with our packaged business capabilities and then just replace the ones that you think need to be replaced. If you don't like our Elasticsearch based search capabilities and you want to use Algolia, for example, you can do that. Or as we saw in the demo, if we want to replace or extend the workflow capabilities with something like Trello, we can do that as well. So we're trying to provide a little bit of the best of both worlds. We want to have the composability that DCX provides, and we also want to help you manage the complexity. And the analogy that I think kind of works here is that many people like to go to Walmart for their groceries and their household needs. It's kind of like a one-stop shopping experience, but they like it because of the convenience. And I think most importantly, because they have the option to get any specific individual item from a different vendor, right? So they can go to one place, but if they don't find what they want or they don't like what they see for any reason, it just could just be that the variety of coffee makers or the variety of meats, for example, aren't what they need. They could get everything else from that store and then go to the local butcher for the one specialty item. And overall, I think that's what most large-scale enterprises will do. They'll look for a vendor that meets many of their needs and that allows them to plug in and replace other needs or capabilities. There's a lot of value in having the ability to choose, but also the convenience to do so only when you need to. Okay, we're pretty close on time, so I'm going to wrap up here. I want to thank you all for your time today. I hope you liked what you saw. If you do, please reach out to us at CrafterCMS.com or through our open source project, CrafterCMS.org, and have a great day.